Good evening, and thank you for tuning into our study tonight. We are on week 28 of the Gospel of John. Before we get there, let me give you a little bit in the news. First off, news that just hit today, just quickly. With Ukrainian war escalating, Russia's Igor Kachenko announced today on Russian Channel 1 a, quote, first strike, talking about nuclear, would involve, he said, hitting targets on the territory of the United States. He says, "We will not wage war with you in Europe. We will hit America in response to your attacks on Russian and civilian facilities." That's absolutely frightening. Number two, new survey from England. More than 60% of the Church of England pastors are apostate. Number three, called the Bible trials, Finland is looking to imprison one of its members of the Finnish parliament. Her name is Pavi Rasren for her articulation of a Christian perspective on marriage and sexuality. She served as an honorable member of the Finnish parliament since 1995 for 28 years. That just happened today, those articles. Let me give you a little bit more as we go on. Let's talk about the New World Order, and this one that you've heard before, Agenda 2030. It's an online deepfakes may accelerate global ID for internet access. I know that's a lot to unpack, but let's just go at it. So this is a follow-up to a headline I recently shared about global ID and about deepfakes. Deepfake videos have the power to deceive and manipulate the masses, especially in a world where videos can go viral within seconds. What was once a complex and time-consuming process reserved for skilled individuals is now within the reach of virtual anyone thanks to a powerful software and machine learning algorithms. Creating convincing deepfakes has become alarmingly effortless. Last week, NBC News viewed more than 50 videos posted on those sites that featured computer-generated and manipulated images and audio of well-known people, all of which appear to have been created to scam viewers out of money. Many of them centered on Elon Musk, with manipulated videos of several news and television personalities, including CBS News anchor Gayle King, former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, and HBO host Bill Maher, falsely claiming that Musk had invented a technology advancing an investment platform. That means that these people are actually appearing and the AI is making them say these things just like they would in real life. Most of the videos continue with a similarly deepfaked version of Musk speaking, who encouraged viewers to invest their money in the non-existent platform. Many of the videos had tens of thousands of views, showing how quickly such videos can spread. And some experts are warning the first deepfake election will arrive next year, when a substantial number of voters will see political disinformation videos online and not be able to tell with certainty whether they're real or not. It may only be a matter of time until a deepfake goes viral to the degree that it causes a national crisis, such as fake political assassination or other dramatic news events that would destabilize our society. This could be the triggering event to bring about new rules for the internet, including a digital ID system. The idea of a digital ID system is not entirely new. In some countries, digital identification has already been implemented for government services and online banking. However, expanding the use of digital IDs to cover all online activities would be a significant step towards global ID for everyone. That means you can't get on the internet without an ID. Now watch, no ID, no access. Would change the nature of identification and verification systems worldwide. While it might seem to make sense on some levels, the threat to personal freedoms and the potential for abuse by government is vast. In the same way that digital currency provides authorities the ability to track and record every online financial transaction you make, digital ID will provide the same for every click you make online. Do we really want the government to have real-time access to our web browsing? If so, government could block access to anyone they deem as out of touch with the culture, namely those who are traditional Christians with Christian values. Europe has already taken the first step towards such restrictions with Digital Services Act, which can fine or ban people for similar offenses. However, this would be on an entirely larger scale and, in the wrong hands, putting global control over the flow of information into the hands of just a few. The UN has made no secret of its plans to have a global digital identity as part of its Sustainable Development Goals set forth in what they call Agenda 2030. Some of the more controversial technologies already talked about for maintaining such a digital ID system are chip implants that can be inserted into someone in chip form. I am quoting from Agenda 2030 from the United Nations. Really? Can you say Revelation chapter 13? You would then scan that chip ID over an internet-enabled device to gain access to the internet. It has been suggested that such chips could not only be used for a form of biometrical identification, but also incorporate a digital wallet, digital currency, and health records, vaccination records. Oh, how convenient, how antichrist. Students of the Bible prophecy have long warned that our society was slowly marching towards acceptance of technology that is described in the book of Revelation. Chapter 13 says the time is coming in which a mark in the right hand or forehead would be used as both a symbol of identification with the Antichrist and a means to conduct commerce. Without that mark, no one can buy or sell. Agenda 2030 is still 7 years away, but at the rate technology of society is changing, we may see such changes faster than anyone thought. So now is the time to start studying the book of Revelation in detail. My most popular YouTube teaching is Revelation Revealed, an in-depth look at what's about to happen on planet Earth. Let me go a little bit more on this New World agenda. Facial recognition equipped robot dog to prowl U.S. sporting venue. Look at this chart. Look at that robot. A robot security dog equipped with cameras and facial recognition is about to prowl a sporting venue in the United States. This hits pretty close to home. Mercedes-Benz Stadium, located in Atlanta, Georgia, has already introduced Benzi, the drone dog, designed by Boston Dynamics and developed by Asalon Robotics. Benzi will automatically and autonomously patrol 11 acres and send back real-time video during 30-minute shifts. Benzi is a facial quadruped equipped robot dog to prowl sporting events. It's an unmanned ground vehicle that pairs Boston Dynamics with Asalon's custom applications, including Pup Pack, Doghouse, and Drone IQ. Aside from facial recognition, the robot can perform license plate recognition and sniff for explosive and narcotics. Drone Dog was designed for both the government and commercial use. These metal beasts have enough artificial intelligence to problem solve and determine how best to hunt down, I'm quoting, humans who have violated certain laws. I hope you're seeing where this is going. Simplified versions of the Terminator. That future also means multiple possibilities for violence. China has made their own version of Spot, Benzi, except they strapped a gun to it. And so obviously we're watching it progress, which leaves us with yet another robo-dog that the U.S. company called Throwflame. It's developed into the first ever flamethrower wielding robot dog, according to its website. The militarization of robot dogs is absolutely terrifying. Even more disturbing is that some of these robots are receiving OpenAI's ChatGPT upgrades that make them even more intelligent. Earlier this year, the Australian military used artificial intelligence to allow soldiers to control robot dogs solely with their minds. Called the Brain Robotic Interface, the state-of-the-art artificial intelligence through a high-tech biosensor headset analyzes brainwave readings and feeds them from a person's visual cortex into the advanced RoboDog new flash report. Now this may all be new to some of you, but I'm telling you, this stuff is cutting edge and is going to be used all over the place. The whole process is not difficult to master. It's very intuitive. It only took a couple of sessions, said 5th Combat Service Support Battalion Sergeant Damian Robinson, who test drove the HoloLens headset. Robinson and fellow soldiers did course training with the mind-reading headsets and robodogs. Some fear robotics may become too smart for their human controllers and act independently as they continue to access AI to make independent decisions. Now that's a warm and fuzzy feeling, isn't it? That a robot can make decisions on who they should hunt down and who they shouldn't. I'm telling you, it's getting very, very Orwellian. Here's another one for you. Direct government censorship of the internet is here and it's going to get worse. Censorship of the internet has been getting worse for years. We just crossed the threshold though, which is going to take things to a whole new level. On August 25th, the new law was known as Digital Service Act. It went into effect in the European Union. Under this new law, European bureaucrats will be able to order big tech companies to censor any content that is considered to be illegal, disinformation, or hate speech. That includes content that is posted by users even outside the European Union, because someone that lives in the European Union might see it. This new law will give government officials the power to force big tech companies to take down any content that they don't like. Any big tech companies that choose not to comply will be hit with extremely harsh penalties and fines. Now, doesn't that sound wonderful? Under the EU law, governments will be able to ask companies to take down a wide range of content, including material that promotes terrorism, child sex abuse, hate speech, and that one is a catch-all, and commercial scams. In addition to illegal content and hate speech, the Digital Services Act also applies to hoaxes and any material that is considered to be disinformation. These new content rules are so vague that they could apply to just about anything. And that's precisely what they want. Under this Orwellian regime, a team of hundreds of unelected EU bureaucrats will decide what constitutes disinformation and instruct big tech firms to censor it. Once installed inside big tech firms, the vast content regulation apparatus will surely affect users in the rest of the world also. Far-left organizations that have been set up to police content online will now be given extraordinary power to restrict speech on the internet. Needless to say, the internet is never going to be the same after this. Initially, this new law will apply to 19 very large online platforms. Now listen to them because it's already happening in Europe. Alibaba, AliExpress, Amazon Store, Apple App Store, Booking.com, Facebook, Google Play, Google Maps, Google Shopping, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Snapchat, TikTok X, which is listed as Twitter, Wikipedia, YouTube, the European clothing retailer Zalando, Bing, and Google Search. If any of those large online platforms choose not to comply with this new law, their penalties could be extremely severe. A firm that does not comply with the law could face a complete ban in Europe, or fines running up to 6% of its global revenue. Last month, Twitter said it was on track to generate $3 billion in revenue. A fine of 6% would be the equivalent of $144 million. Last month, Twitter said it was on track to generate this, and they could be fined. Once we get to February 24th, 2024, the Digital Services Act will also apply to a vast multitude of smaller platforms. At that point, it'll be very difficult to escape the reach of this new law. For many years, the internet was one of the last bastions of free speech, but now, even that's changing. From this point forward, far-left European bureaucrats will get to determine what is acceptable and what is not acceptable on our large online platforms. Direct government censorship of the internet is now here. That is going to make it much, much more difficult to share the truth with the world that desperately needs it. We are watching us just be bottlenecked into the last days. It's happening. But remember, God's in control. Let me give you a little bit from Israel, some encouraging news. Archaeology confirms King David. As recently as just 30 years ago, King David was just a mythical figure for many secular historians. I've gone to biblical archaeology review seminars that said there was no such thing, no such person as King David. However, over the last few decades, archaeological evidence has been mounting to support not only the idea that King David existed, but also that he oversaw a powerful and substantial kingdom, just like the Bible said he did. In 1993, the Tel Dan stele was found near the Syrian border, referring clearly to, quote, the house of David. The stele dates back to within 140 years of David's death, about 1000 BC. Recent research at the Temple Mount and in the vicinity of Jerusalem is right now unearthing substantial buildings and fortifications never before known. When I take people to Israel, we actually go to a place called Milo, which is a spot where David had his house and a temple. And so that was not uncovered till recently. Prominent Holy Land archaeologist Eilat Mazar uncovered some of those large buildings. He's a non-religious archaeologist who nevertheless took the Bible history seriously. Mazar told Christianity Today in an interview before his death in 2021, "This is Jerusalem which we know best from the Bible, which contains within its descriptions of genuine historical reality." For centuries, critics of the Bible have argued that there is no little or no secular evidence of the Bible's validity. Yet as time goes on, archaeology continues to validate the authenticity of biblical claims. including that King David was a powerful king overseeing a substantial kingdom. I love it. Nobody's doubting it anymore. Speaking of Israel, let's go to this one. This is Israeli farmer revives the biblical balm of Gilead and third temple incense. Jeremiah 8:22 asks the question, is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then has not the health of the daughter of my people been restored? One very special farmer in the Holy Land is raising rare and endangered plants in an effort to bring back the biblical balm of Gilead and the temple incense. In 2008, Guy Ehrlich was driven to recreate the biblical balm of Gilead, renowned for its healing powers. Incredibly rare, even in biblical times, growing only in the extreme heat and saline soil of the Dead Sea area, it disappeared from the region in the 6th century. A German scientist smuggled a single shoot out of Saudi Arabia, and some plants were at the botanical gardens in Jerusalem. Unfortunately, the climate of Jerusalem was too cold for the desert-loving plants. But fortunately, before they all died, the garden sent some of them to Dr. Elaine Soloway, director of the Center for Sustainable Agriculture at Kibbutz Keturah. She provided Ehrlich with a beginning for his 6-acre biblical farm. The plants thrived in the Dead Sea climate, and his farm now has about 5,000 balsam plants. He says, I am a Jew, and we know that when Jews are in Israel, the desert blooms, he told Israeli 365 News. The temple just happened to be part of that, he said. The incense was part of the temple. It is believed that the balm of Gilead was so important that the Bible referred to it simply as generic by the generic names balm, or in Hebrew, zori, perfume. As such, it is believed that by some biblical commentators to have been carried by the caravan that received Joseph from the pit in Genesis 37:25. When Jacob dispatched his embassy into Egypt, his present to the unknown ruler included a little balm, Genesis 43:11. Balm was one of the commodities which Hebrew merchants carried to the market of Tyre, Ezekiel 27:17. And according to 1 Kings 10:10, balm or balsam was also among the precious gifts given to the Queen of Sheba by King Solomon. The balm was made from the tree known scientifically as Commiphora gileadanus. The sap of the balsam tree is released by cutting the bark. In the latter days, Jewish history, the neighborhood of Jericho is believed to be the only spot where the true balsam grew. In Roman times, it was grown only in Jericho and En Gedi in the desert, and it generated much revenue for both the Hasmoneans and the Romans, and for King Herod. The Muslims' conquest brought an end to its production. Ehrlich now cultivates around 60 biblical plants on his farm near Almog in the Jordan Valley, near the northwestern shores of the Dead Sea. He creates creams, perfumes, soap, and honey. Ehrlich is the only farm in existence in the world that cultivates boswellian trees, an endangered species that is the source of the frankincense that constituted one of the 11 ingredients in the temple incense. The boswellia tree is in danger of extinction and has no agricultural cultivation anywhere else in the world except on Ehrlich's farm. Top-grade frankincense can sell for hundreds of dollars per pound. He also cultivates myrrh. His trees have been certified by the Temple Institute for use in the third temple once it's rebuilt, which want to make sure the raw materials of the incense will be available when the Temple Mount is rebuilt. His online stores, and you can go online, offers myrrh and frankincense oil, balm of Gilead essential oil, balm of Gilead perfume, incense to be used for the Havdalah ritual, first temple anointing oil, second temple anointing oil, and even third temple anointing oil. It is also possible to sponsor biblical trees. He produces premium honey from the trees that sells for, you ready for this? $1,000 per kilogram. So it's kind of amazing because all the things for the temple to be rebuilt are starting to take place. A red heifer is now in Israel. The balm of Gilead is now there. We are watching things progress very quickly. Let me give you this one. And obviously you've been seeing my dire warnings on the economics, Bidenomics. Well, President Biden and his allies in Congress have pushed for more federal spending, which, by the way, we don't need at all, with no means to finance their multi-million-dollar budgets. That has caused the Treasury to borrow well over $1 trillion just this year, which in turn has prompted the Federal Reserve to create trillions of dollars to finance the borrowing spree. Now just listen to it because you get a little understanding about inflation and the interest rates and housing. We'll go on through several articles. The predictable result of too much money relative to the size of the economy, of course, is inflation. as prices everywhere are rising and continue to rise. The housing market has not been spared from this relentless upward march in prices, with both median rents and mortgage payments at all-time highs. The result of a double whammy from high prices and high interest rates. Now just listen to this and you can figure it out. Let me just simplify it in a moment. As inflation hit a 40-year high, the Federal Reserve blatantly raised interest rates and tightened credit to cool off inflation. It held cause in the first place. After creating of trillions of dollars for the government to spend, the logical thing to do would to take the money back from the government. Instead, though, the Fed is going primarily to the American people for its pound of flesh. The combination of higher home prices and higher interest rates are at record highs, and mortgage rates are 3 times higher than they were 3 years ago. Those two factors have caused the monthly mortgage payment on a medium-priced home to more than double. Wait for this, from $979 to $2,075. Wow. That's costing a family more than $13,000 extra per year for the same house. This has forced many Americans to rent instead, and the increased demand for apartments has driven rents to record highs. So as we continue to see this, for those lucky enough to have gotten a mortgage before interest rates jumped, they are now wearing golden handcuffs and are trapped in their home and mortgage. If they were to sell their homes and move, they'd lose their current mortgage rate with a low interest rate and have to get a new mortgage with double the interest rate. That's prohibitively expensive for most Americans, millions of Americans, and it's putting a severe crimp in the supply of existing homes. Unfortunately, the supply of new homes is also being hamstrung. Because of inflation, cost indexes for home builders are near all-time highs. So the sellers of new homes cannot afford to reduce their selling prices, which would help offset higher interest costs to the home buyers. I hope you're following this. Since so few people can afford a home at today's prices and today's interest rates, home builders have been forced to scale back their construction. And that has reduced the supply of new homes on the market. Can you see a domino effect, the circular effect of this? The drop in supply is keeping upward pressure on home prices, while the continued growth of government, a la Biden economics or Bidenomics, is pushing interest rates even skyward. The entire destructive process, though, can be short-circuited if we just remove the first link in the chain, excessive government spending. If Bidenomics is not reversed, don't expect the housing market to improve anytime soon. After all, one definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Bidenomics is as smart as its namesake, dumber than a bag of rocks. Let me give you a little bit more. Will consumers last until Christmas? Credit card debt crisis out of control. You don't hear this on nightly news, but you really need to hear it. We aren't quite there yet, but an enormous credit card debt crisis is definitely brewing. Americans are becoming increasingly dependent on their credit cards to make ends meet from month to month. The percentage of us that are carrying balances from month to month is growing, and the average rate of an interest on such balances has risen above 20%. Now listen, almost everyone has credit cards. The worst thing you can do is allow a balance to go over from one month to the next. You're paying 20% interest on that unpaid balance. There's 8 signs that we are in a major credit card crisis. 1, the total amount of credit card debt in the United States has surpassed $1 trillion. That's the highest level ever recorded. The average rate of interest on credit cards is 20.63%. A whopping 47% of U.S. cardholders are carrying balances from month to month. They're paying 21%. 4, the average credit card debt level in the United States is continuing to grow, no end in sight. Connecticut recently had the highest average of debt level of $9,408, surpassing the national average by 30%. 5, most Americans are not running up credit card debt because they are making frivolous purchases. It's because they're under financial strain. It's not good. 6, number of credit card delinquencies in the United States has surged dramatically over the past 2 years, over 45%. 7, many Americans that actually use personal loans to consolidate credit card debts. You know how they say, we can get you out of debt, you can get this loan. They end up quickly running up new credit card balances close to the previous levels. Plus, now they have another consolidated loan. At a time when economic conditions are slowing down all over the nation, Americans are becoming increasingly dependent on their credit cards. The economy is clearly headed for a very rough period, and the long-term outlook is even worse. So now is not the time to pile on more debt. Instead, now is the time to batten down the hatches and get skinny when it talks about your economics. I would very much encourage you to get lean and mean financially, because those that are carrying high levels of debt are likely to experience a lot of pain in the future. Let's go to religion. Less than half the churchgoers believe essential Christian doctrines. Family Research Council Center for Biblical Worldview released results of an extensive survey this Wednesday on the views of adult churchgoers in America on social issues and worldview. The FRC's latest survey is unique because it gives insight into what's the nation's most devout churchgoers believe. These are ones that go to church devoutly. Methodology that screened out those who do not attend church. In other words, they didn't rely on religious self-identification. To qualify for their study, you need to attend church at least weekly. The survey found that 72% of the respondents attend church weekly, with 28% they attend at least once a month. We were able to take the pulse of what active churchgoers truly believe. Clausen, who did the study, he went on to describe the data points that gave him hope. I was encouraged by the number of findings, including the high percentage of those who indicated that they desire their church to offer additional worldview training on social and political responsibility, on abortion, the value of human life, and human sexuality. I was also encouraged that 88% of adult churchgoers indicate that they believe it's important for Christians to have a biblical worldview. The fact that 94% of churchgoers are registered to vote also demonstrates the effort to register church members was very successful. But Clausen was also disheartened by some of the results. For example, he continued, only 41% of churchgoers said that they believe people are born into sin. Only 41%. And can only be saved from its consequences by Jesus. Yes, they can only be saved by their consequences by Jesus, but everyone's born into sin. How come only 41% of active churchgoers believe that people are born into sin? How in the world can that be? Findings like this demonstrate that many of our churches need to redouble their efforts at teaching basic doctrinal truths. Clausen further discussed his reaction to what the survey revealed about churchgoers' view on abortion. 63% of churchgoers identify as pro-life. Only 52 of those believe that life begins at conception. Can you see what's happening here? I can. Churchgoers, religious churchgoers, don't read their Bibles, and they're not being taught about Christian truths by their pastors and their leaders. From readings and passages such as Luke 1:39-45 and Psalm 139:13-16, it's extremely clear that the Bible affirms the person of an unborn from the moment of conception. The churches need to spend some more time emphasizing these biblical truths and less time being user-friendly, in my opinion. And we need to warm up the word, not the coffee. Let me give you a little bit more moral decay. American College of Obstetrics demands abortion up to birth without limits. The pro-abortion American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists has announced that it will nationally support abortion up to birth without limits. The group stated that abortion must be available without restrictions, without limitations, without barriers. They claim abortion saves lives and should be done without limitations. Saves lives? Are you kidding me? Abortion must be available without restrictions, they said, without limitations, without barriers. Just any critical part of health care, Zahn and Villavicencio of the group said. Villavicencio has also previously falsely asserted that later abortions are only done if things have gone terribly wrong with a pregnancy. But one study from the pro-abortion group Anshear states the reasons people need third trimester abortions are not so different from why people need abortions before the third trimester. Women have abortions in the third trimester for multiple reasons, it states, including the fact that they didn't know they were pregnant, that they had difficulty arranging abortions, and that the baby had a health problem or disability. None of the abortions were committed due to the mother's health being at risk. The announcement that the group wants abortions on demand for any reason throughout all 9 months of pregnancy is an admittance of a dark truth that existed in the shadows of pro-abortion movement for years. Jen Psaki, former Biden White House press secretary, stated, "No one wants late-term abortions. No one is running on the platform of aborting viable babies." Oh yeah? She should have told her boss, President Biden, that. If the mother is financially struggling or deemed too young to parent, this does not justify actively killing an innocent person. If the pregnant woman is facing a medical crisis and her pregnancy must end in order to save her life or preserve her health care, compassionate, knowledgeable doctors would not force her to choose her own life over the child's, but would perform an induced preterm delivery or emergency C-section in an attempt to save her child's life as well as hers. In later induced abortions, however, the abortionist takes the time to kill the preborn child up to as long as 3 days before forcing the mother to deliver a dead child. At times, actual dismemberment is used to tear the limbs from a child's body while he or she is still alive in the womb and is capable of feeling pain. Intentional killing is not compassionate and is not health care. We are witnessing in real time a vocal political takeover of a scientific community that represents the most honorable and beautiful profession, responsible for safely bringing new life into the world, one gynecologist stated. Polling has consistently shown that the majority of Americans believe there should be pro-life protections placed on abortion. 61% of those surveyed said they consider themselves to be pro-choice, yet 69% want abortion to be significantly restricted. According to a poll, 79% of Americans do not want abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy, as was allowed under Roe v. Wade, and as abortion advocates and pro-abortion politicians are seeking. Americans are compassionate people and overwhelmingly reject all trimester abortions on demand. The more they learn the extremist positions of organizations in power, the more they reject them. Let me give you one last one, and it's under good news. The Feast of Trumpets is coming. Can you hear the footsteps of Messiah? So most Jews know what Rosh Hashanah was. Most of the Jewish kids took half the day off. But the Feast of Trumpets, few Jews know much about it, and that's sad. And it's odd because this is the date most associated with Messiah's return, according to Judaism. Jesus says in Matthew 24:30 and 31, "Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. They shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." And since it's the Feast of Trumpets, there's a ram horn, the shofar, the Hebrew word for trumpet. The blowing of the shofar signifies the beginning of the 10 days of repentance leading up to Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement, the holiest day in the Hebrew calendar. But if that's not enough, later in Matthew 24:36-37, Jesus adds, "But of that day and hour knows no man, nor the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." No one has to extrapolate what the days of Noah were. They were licentious, they were horrible, and obviously we're living in them. Why don't Jews know the day and the hour? Why don't we? Because this is one of the feasts that has an anomaly, a forgotten feast of the Jews, and one that is completely a mystery to Christians. Think about the Messiah's relationship to the Jews when you hear this next verse I'm about to read. In Zechariah 12:10, about when he returns, quote, "And I will pour upon the house of David the spirit of grace and supplication, and they, the Jews, shall look upon me whom they have pierced." Who does that resemble? It's only Jesus. The people are waiting for their Messiah. He's coming to save his people. Yet they start their greatest hour of mourning. Why are they confused? Because it's the time of starting the traditional 10 days of mourning. That's what Rosh Hashanah is. Why are Christians caught unawares? Because they're not always expecting him. These are God's appointed holy days for all of his people. They are called in the Bible the feasts of the Lord. They haven't been forgotten by God. They weren't forgotten or forsaken by Jesus, who observed them all. They weren't forgotten by his apostles, who observed them all. In fact, the Hebrew calendar is a foreshadowing of redemption, with Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of First Fruits in the spring, which were all fulfilled when Jesus came. They are followed by Shavuot, which Christians call Pentecost, 50 days later. In the fall come the trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and tabernacles. They all have significance and meaning with regard to the life, the death, the resurrection, and the return of Jesus Christ. It's just that most Christians haven't been taught these things. They don't know what they don't know. They've been robbed of their own Hebrew roots, even their Christian roots. But one thing is undeniable. Christians still worship a Jewish Messiah. That's what our faith is all about. And someday soon, a Jew is going to rule the world. His name is Jesus. Then it'll all be clear once again. So how will he return? 1 Thessalonians 4:16-17. "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and the trump of God." And it says, "And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up, so forever to be with the Lord in the air." And it says, comfort one another with these words. That trump or trumpet could very well be, now listen, on the Feast of Trumpets, one of these years. That would be the most likely time. I get excited when it comes around because it would be the most likely time. Well, we won't know the day or the hour. Of course not. Feast of Trumpets lasts 10 days. So it's extremely rich and meaningful, and will make you take the time to study the Hebrew calendar and these feasts of the Lord. They weren't just for yesterday. They're for today, and they're for tomorrow. They're not just Jewish traditions. They're God's appointed times for all of his children. If you're one of his children or seek to be, take the time to learn about these holy days this year. By the way, the Feast of the Trumpets begins this year on September 16th. You can read about all the eternal appointment times in Leviticus chapter 23. My question is, could the rapture of the church take place sometime in those 10 days from September 16th of this year? We don't know, but every time the Feast of Trumpets comes along, I get chills. It's the next prophetic feast to be fulfilled by Jesus. That's in the news for tonight. I'm going to go right into our study.